Miss Molly Qerim, longtime host for ESPN's First Take, my day job, where she has been the last 10 years. Last night, she abruptly resigned.
This thing's a bit more complicated than just they couldn't settle on the money. It just seems more serious. She's off the show now.
One thing she didn't mention was anybody by name, including Stephen A. Smith.
For 10 years, millions watched Molly Qerim masterfully manage Stephen A. Smith's explosive takes on First Take. She was the calm in the storm, the professional anchor who made ESPN's flagship morning show appointment television. To fans, Molly and Stephen A. seemed like the perfect partnership, respectful colleagues, trusted friends, unstoppable teammates. But behind the cameras and the scripted banter, a very different story was unfolding. When Molly suddenly walked away in September 2025, refusing to even mention Stephen A.'s name in her goodbye, the sports world realized they'd been watching a perfectly crafted illusion. The truth about what really happened will shock you. It's July 2015, and ESPN has a massive problem. Their flagship morning show, First Take, just lost its anchor. Carrie Champion got promoted to SportsCenter, leaving Stephen A. Smith and the entire production team scrambling for someone who could handle the chaos of live television and explosive sports debates. Enter Molly Qerim. Now, Molly wasn't some unknown commodity. This woman had serious credentials. A University of Connecticut graduate with a communications degree, master's from Quinnipiac University in broadcast journalism. She'd already earned an Emmy Award back in 2008 for her work on Fantasy Football Now, CBS Sports, NFL Network. She'd been building her reputation across multiple networks for years.
Molly Qerim. She's leaving First Take and ESPN at the end of this year. This is kind of shocking, surprising news. They offered her a contract. No one has the details. Did she not get offered enough money?
But here's what made Molly absolutely perfect for First Take. She could control the uncontrollable. Stephen A. Smith is legendary for his passionate takes and explosive energy. Skip Bayless was the master of controversial opinions. These are personalities who could derail any conversation in seconds. Most hosts would get steamrolled by that kind of intensity. Not Molly. She became the calm in the storm. The professional anchor who could guide a heated debate about LeBron James without losing control. The voice of reason when arguments got too personal. She had this incredible ability to redirect energy, ask the right questions, and keep million-dollar personalities focused on delivering great television. And trust me, it did work. First Take became an appointment television under Molly's leadership. Ratings climbed. Social media clips went viral. ESPN had struck gold with a host who could make Stephen A. Smith look even better while never getting overshadowed herself. For 10 years, now let that sink in, 10 years, Molly Qerim was the face and voice commanding that desk. She interviewed A-list celebrities, covered championship events, traveled with the show to major sporting events. She wasn't just hosting, she was building a brand and becoming synonymous with ESPN's morning dominance. Fans loved her warmth and authority. Colleagues respected her professionalism. Stephen A. publicly credited her as someone he leaned on during challenging times. Everyone assumed this was a partnership that would last decades.
She's very, very telegenic, photogenic, and probably fits.
But here's where the fairy tale starts to crack. January 2024 arrives with news that would change everything for Molly Qerim, even though she probably didn't realize it at the time. Stephen A. Smith just signed the most insane contract in sports media history. 5 years, $105 million. $21 million annually from ESPN alone, plus another $12 million from SiriusXM. We're talking about $33 million per year, with potential to reach $40 million with other ventures. Now let that sink in. Stephen A. was now earning more money than most professional athletes, more than some entire NFL coaching staffs. He literally became one of the highest paid personalities in all of entertainment. And sitting right next to him every morning, Molly Qerim, making an estimated $2 to $3 million annually. Talented, professional, essential to the show's success, but suddenly earning less than 10% of her co-host salary. Jason Whitlock nailed it perfectly.
When you pay Stephen A. Smith $20 million, that means, okay, well, whoever his co-host is, they're going to want an exorbitant amount of money. And so she may have been making $2.5, $3 million as the host. Well, when Stephen A is sitting there making 20, well, maybe now she wants to make 10.
Molly spent 10 years building First Take into ESPN's flagship morning program. She's not just reading questions off cards, she's controlling explosive personalities, managing live television, conducting interviews with A-list celebrities. She's literally the backbone that allows Stephen A to be Stephen A. But suddenly, the show that she helped build is generating enough revenue to justify paying her co-host 40 times what most Americans make in a lifetime. Every year, industry standards suggest co-hosts typically earn 30 to 50% of the lead personality's salary. If Stephen A is making $21 million, shouldn't Molly be somewhere around $7 to $10 million, especially after proving her value for a decade? But here's where ESPN's budget reality kicks in. They've just committed over $500 million to broadcast NBA games. Stephen's contract alone cost them over $100 million. Other personalities like Malika Andrews are getting extensions. Money is getting tight, so when Molly's contract negotiations begin in early 2025, ESPN executives already know the truth. Burke Magnus, ESPN's president of content, admits something shocking. She was going to come off First Take either way. We had already crossed that bridge.
She was an important part of an anchor show. She was there for a very long time. So yeah, no matter what we think of her, I think she'll be missed, and good luck to her in the future.
Wait, what? They had already decided to remove Molly from First Take regardless of contract negotiations before they even started talking about money? Magnus continues. It was much more about what else she could be doing. How could we make her more versatile? Translation, we're moving you off the show that made you famous. But hey, maybe we can find you something else to do for way less money. The contract negotiations were theater. ESPN knew her role was replaceable with someone making a lot less money looking for their shot. Molly probably realized the truth pretty quickly. This wasn't about money, this was about disposal. But here's where the story gets absolutely devastating. Remember Stephen A. Smith, the man Molly had spent 10 years supporting, protecting, and making look good on national television? Remember the guy who publicly claimed to be a champion for his colleagues?
Miss Molly Qerim, longtime host for ESPN's First Take, my day job, where she has been the last 10 years. Last night, she abruptly resigned.
Just weeks before Molly's departure, Stephen A was on air bragging about his loyalty to fellow ESPN personalities. I stood up for Shannon Sharp, he boasted. I did that for this person. I did that for that person. He positioned himself as the guy who fought for people, the advocate, the loyal teammate who used his influence to help others get paid. But when Molly needed him most, radio silence. Think about the power dynamics here. Stephen A just signed a $105 million deal. He's literally ESPN's most valuable asset. If anyone could walk into Burke Magnus's office and say, hey, Molly has been essential to First Take success for a decade. She deserves a significant raise. It would be Stephen A. Smith. Instead, what happened? Sources suggest Stephen A. basically told Molly everyone has a boss and that he couldn't control budget decisions. Translation, it's not my problem.
Molly is a friend. Molly is a co-worker. Molly is somebody that I have leaned on many occasions in the past, as she has done when it comes to me. We've been partners.
Jason Whitlock picked up on something crucial. When she doesn't come into work the next day, it makes it clear that maybe Stephen A. is part of her frustration. Here's the brutal irony. Stephen A. spent years publicly crediting Molly as someone he leaned on during challenging times. He called her a friend. He praised her as an enormous part of our success. But when it came to actually support her behind closed doors, when it came time to use his unprecedented influence to advocate for the woman who'd spent a decade making him look good, crickets. Imagine Molly's perspective for a second. You've spent 10 years managing this man's explosive personality. You've made him look reasonable and professional. You've guided conversations, asked the right questions, controlled the chaos. You've literally helped build his brand and contributed to his massive success. And then when ESPN decides to essentially discard you, your longtime partner, the guy making $40 million annually, can't be bothered to make a phone call on your behalf. That's not just professional disappointment, that's personal betrayal.
We're thinking, okay, it's going to play out, and there's going to be a grand farewell, celebration show, goodbye. And she just Dear John'd him. She said, out.
Because here's what Stephen A. probably didn't realize. Molly wasn't just angry about the money. She was devastated by the complete lack of loyalty from someone she considered a genuine friend and partner. The man who publicly bragged about standing up for colleagues abandoned her when she needed him most. And that betrayal would soon become very, very public. So here's where Molly demonstrates that she's been watching and learning from 10 years of television strategy. Because what happened next was absolutely masterful. September 15, 2025, Monday evening, the Sports Business Journal drops a nuke report. Molly Qerim has declined ESPN's contract offer and will be leaving the network at the end of 2025. Now that timing, that wasn't accidental. Someone leaked that story. An industry insider strongly suspect it was Molly or her representatives. She controlled the narrative before ESPN could spin it their way. But here's where she really went off. Tuesday morning, September 16th, instead of showing up to work like normal, Molly posted an Instagram story. She announced her immediate departure from First Take, not December 2025, not after some farewell tour, effective immediately. But here's the most telling detail of all. In her farewell message, after 10 years of partnership, Molly deliberately excludes Stephen A. Smith from any mention whatsoever.
You can play it out to the end of the year and move on to your next deal, but when you don't come in, it makes me think maybe Stephen A. is a part of her frustration.
Think about that. Former ESPN analyst Marcellus Wiley immediately noticed. When Shannon Sharpe left undisputed, he spent 10 minutes naming names. But Molly, stone cold silence about her co-host of a decade. That silence said everything. Meanwhile, ESPN executives are scrambling. Burke Magnus later admits the timing of this situation was unexpected. She issued a statement following a report which caused it to escape our control. Translation: Molly completely blindsided them. They thought they had months to manage this transition. Instead, she forced them into an immediate damage control mode. But the real genius of Molly's strategy? She created chaos without saying a single negative word publicly. She let her actions speak louder than any angry statement could have. The immediate exit, the strategic timing, the deliberate exclusion of Stephen A. from her farewell. Industry insiders understood the message immediately. This wasn't just about money. This was personal. This was about betrayal. This was about a woman who'd spent 10 years building something special, only to realize that her supposed partner was willing to let her be discarded the moment it became convenient. Now Stephen A. would have to face the cameras and explain why his longtime partner just disappeared without even saying goodbye to him personally. The Queen was making her final move, and it was devastating. Now here's where Stephen A. absolutely crashes and burns on live television. Tuesday morning, September 16th. He has to explain to millions of viewers why his co-host of 10 years just disappeared overnight without even a mention of his name. Watch his body language as he starts the show.
Been partners on the show for the last 10 years. And a lot of times some of these things happen and it's just uncomfortable to see. The details, quite frankly, are none of y'all business.
Notice the word choice, departing, not leaving. He's already trying to soften the language because he knows this looks terrible. But then Stephen A. makes his first massive mistake. On his SiriusXM show that same afternoon, he says, abruptly resigned. Those two words tell you everything you need to know about how blindsided Stephen A. really was. Then he makes another critical error. Emmanuel Aiko calls him out for a glaring contradiction. Stephen A. claims the details are private business, and then immediately provides specific details about contract negotiations, ESPN's desires, and Molly's decision-making process. Aiko's response was brutal, pointing out that Stephen A. mentioned specific details about the resignation being unexpected, then claimed he wouldn't share specific. The contradiction was obvious and damaging.
I just thought it ain't none of y'all business. It was a contract negotiation. Well, oh, so that was about the money. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for cluing it. It's always about the money, though.
But here's the most damaging part of Stephen A.'s response. What he doesn't say. No mention of fighting for Molly's contract. No acknowledgement of supporting her financially. No taking responsibility for his role in her departure. Instead, he goes on this weird tangent about everyone having bosses and not being completely free. Jason Whitlock picks up on this immediately, suggesting those comments might be connected to the Molly situation. Perhaps Stephen A. wanted to help but claimed to be powerless over budget decisions. Translation: maybe Stephen A. wanted Molly to get more money, but wasn't willing to sacrifice anything personal to make it happen. The most telling moment? Stephen A. admits the departure was a complete surprise and he wasn't aware that Molly was considering leaving. Think about that statement. Your partner of 10 years quits immediately and you had no idea it was coming? Either Stephen A. is completely oblivious to workplace dynamics, or Molly deliberately kept him in the dark because she no longer trusted him. Given everything that we know about Stephen A.'s failure to advocate for her, the latter seems more likely. The damage was done. Stephen A. appeared hurt, confused, and guilty simultaneously. Industry insiders were starting to connect the dots about his role in this professional disaster. Now here's where the real secrets get spilled, and ESPN executives accidentally reveal just how cold and calculated this whole situation really was. September 18th, Burke Magnus, ESPN's president of content, sits down for an interview and drops bombshells that completely contradict the public narrative. What he reveals next will shock you. Magnus admits that Molly was going to come off First Take regardless of contract negotiations, and that ESPN had already crossed that bridge. From their perspective, it was much more about finding alternative roles for her and making her more versatile.
Just the mere fact that an executive's gonna tell us why Molly's gone and Molly hasn't said a word? Interesting. And two, why would an executive at ESPN talk about talent that's no longer on their network? That's not how they usually roll. Maybe they're trying to frame this one a little different.
You're telling me that ESPN had already decided to remove Molly from First Take before contract negotiations even started? The talks weren't about renewing her hosting role. They were about finding her something else to do. That's not contract negotiation. That's corporate manipulation. Magnus continues by explaining that discussions centered on alternative opportunities and ways to diversify her involvement in different projects. The translation is clear. Move you off the show that made you famous and stick you somewhere cheaper. Think about the brutality of that statement. After 10 years of building First Take into a ratings juggernaut, ESPN executives viewed Molly as easily disposable. Just another expense to cut so they could pay Stephen A. his $105 million salary. Meanwhile, former ESPN personalities start speaking out. Emmanuel Aco criticizes Stephen A.'s contradictory statements. Other industry insiders begin revealing patterns of pay disparities affecting women across sports media. But here's where it gets really revealing. The Athletic reports that ESPN already has a detailed 30 to 45-day tryout process planned for Molly's replacement. They got a comprehensive list of candidates ready to evaluate. This wasn't unexpected chaos. This was meticulously planned months in advance. Sources close to the situation reveal more damaging details. Multiple networks have already reached out to Molly with competitive offers. Industry insiders report significant interest in her services across various media platforms.
To stay on that show, if I'ma stay, you're gonna have to pay me for my suffering. Or give me what I want, give me some more, and let me go do more. They balked at both.
One insider tells media outlets that workplace friction with Stephen A. Smith was a contributing factor in her departure decision. There it is. Industry insiders confirmed what everyone suspected. This wasn't just about financial negotiations. The professional relationship between Molly and Stephen A. had deteriorated significantly behind the scenes. And Stephen A., he makes things worse by discussing people who overvalue themselves in contract negotiations on his podcast. Industry observers immediately interpret this as a direct criticism of Molly. The truth was finally emerging. ESPN had planned to discard Molly from the beginning, and Stephen A. had done nothing to prevent it. So, here's what Molly accomplished without saying a single negative word publicly. She exposed an entire system of corporate manipulation and personal betrayal through strategic timing and professional dignity. First, she revealed ESPN's deceptive practices by forcing them to scramble with damage control. Molly made Burke Magnus accidentally admit that her removal was pre-planned. ESPN couldn't maintain their mutual decision narrative when executives were publicly explaining 30-day tryout processes that they'd already organized. Second, she exposed pay inequality across sports media. Stephen A.'s $105 million contract versus her significantly lower compensation highlighted undervaluation of female talent. Other networks immediately reaching out with competitive offers proved her market value was much higher than ESPN's assessment. Third, she demonstrated Stephen A.'s true character. By excluding him from her farewell message after 10 years of partnership, Molly sent a clear signal about his loyalty. His confused, defensive on-air responses only confirmed that he hadn't advocated for her behind the scenes. Fourth, she maintained complete professional dignity while making her displeasure known. Industry insiders understood the message immediately. Strategic timing, immediate exit, deliberate exclusions, They said more than angry statements ever could have. Molly didn't just leave First Take, she exposed how the game really works and showed everyone that sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is walking away with your dignity intact. The Queen had made her final move and everyone understood the message.